certainly earned your vote of confidence.
Victory and peace. All but the very young among us must be able to recall the thrill of those two words, as 6 years of longing for them became transformed into reality. Victorious troops marched past. The people celebrated. The prisoners came home. The Allies met and got together. Victory and peace. It was victory, all right, as the victors walked over the ruins of Hitler's chancellery. And in the exuberance of the moment, it seemed to be peace, for hostilities had ceased. The statesmen would soon be getting round a table to prepare for the formal peace settlement. But as we know now, peace in the old accepted sense does not follow automatically on victory. And though it was unfortunate that the experienced hands of Churchill and Eden, who knew and foresaw the dangers ahead, should have been removed at this critical period, it was inevitable, perhaps, that no real settlement was reached. No permanent plans emerged to supersede the divided occupation of Germany, Austria, and Korea. In Germany, there was more complication in the split up of Berlin into 4 sectors. The temporary boundaries of occupation became, on the Russian side, an impenetrable iron curtain. The Western Allies demobilized, though they did not abolish conscription. And the Russians maintained their vast armies. Every war produces in its course new processes of destruction. Like aeroplanes and tanks in the First World War, the atom bomb in the Second had only revealed a tithe of the power which it possessed for the prosecution of future wars. This is the aspect of new weapons which appeals to men bidding for world domination. But luckily, the secret of the atom bomb was only at that time known in its fullness to friendly America, whose one object was the preservation of those factors which make for a peaceful world. The atom bomb was then, in fact, an assurance of peace to the Western nations. The United States explored the potentialities of the weapon by various tests in the Pacific and over the Nevada desert. But of course, Russian scientists, aided by the operations of spies and traitors, were working on the atom bomb too. The intention of the Soviet to pursue their own policy of communist aggrandizement, irrespective of the integrity of other nations, had by now become clear. Possession of the atom bomb was fundamental to pursuit of this policy, and a state of tension existed which became known as the Cold War. During the period of the Labour government in Britain, 1945 to 1951, it cannot be said that the danger of the Cold War turning into a hot war grew any less. We are entitled to recall the false accusations made by the socialists in the general election of 1951, that warmongering smear, which was the most discreditable trick ever thought up by a political party. The result, however, was the return of a Tory government, with Winston Churchill as Premier and Anthony Eden as Foreign Secretary. It's important to remind ourselves, what did this government inherit? The war in Korea was still a shooting war. The campaign against terrorism in Malaya was making little headway. In Persia, the weakness of our diplomacy had led to the expropriation of our oil interests and caused the largest refinery in the world at Abadan to shut down. Mounting tension in Egypt was soon to break out into acts of violence and sabotage. And always the Cold War was threatening to become a hot war, as Russia maintained its vast armies, supported communist minorities all over the world, and sought to perfect the atom bomb. (1953), the H-bomb. New and more terrifying possibilities loomed over the world. The first known hydrogen bomb was tested by the United States, and an outcry was raised by socialists against America. Then it was disclosed by the Russians that the Soviet was responsible for exploding one before the Americans. No protest from the socialists. But the menace of the new weapon in communist hands made a shattering impact on Western peoples. The need was for great men to match the greatness of the issues at stake. And fortunately, Britain had such men. Winston Churchill had become Prime Minister, and just as certainly the cause of world peace was blessed in this solemn and critical hour by the presence of Anthony Eden in his old place at the British Foreign Office. Experience is an invaluable asset. If you have to put a lethal weapon into any man's hand, whom do you choose? You choose the hand of the trained and disciplined man of experience, who not only knows the full uses of his weapon, but how to apply the power it provides so that it may never be used in earnest. Such a man is never likely to get trigger happy. He keeps the safety catch on until the very last moment. As with the rifle, so with the new weapons of mass destruction. The statesman of experience, as Mr. Eden has shown, knows the great power with which the A-bomb or H-bomb has endowed its possessor, and he keeps his finger securely on the safety catch. By infinite patience and perseverance, by personal contacts and negotiation, he builds up the mutual respect which must exist between two heavily armed camps if they are to avoid conflict. So it was at the Berlin Conference, where the ground for the major meeting at Geneva, which was to include combatants of the Far Eastern hostilities, was prepared by Mr. Eden. In Geneva, he dominated the conference in his search for terms of a lasting settlement for Korea and for an armistice in Indochina. middle of it, he flew with Sir Winston Churchill to Washington for consultations with the American President and the Secretary of State. During this visit, official United States concurrence for the course of proceedings at Geneva was obtained. Back at Geneva, the French Premier, M. Mendes France, was pledged to secure a truce in Indochina or resign. But as is generally recognized throughout the free world, it was Mr. Eden who saved the conference from foundering. It was Mr. Eden who, with infinite patience and fearless determination, steered the negotiations to a conclusion which ended hostilities in Indochina. For the first time in 15 years, no two nations of the world were at war.
The film that you have just seen will have brought home to you the perils and perplexities which surround us. 9 years ago, we thought that we had paid to the full in blood and treasure. But then the atomic age dawned. The fear of these new weapons added to the mistrust of nations and increased the problems of the foreign offices all over the world. When we took over office 3 years ago, I had never promised you that we could bring about some magic cure. But I think that you will feel that the work which we have done is enough to disprove those malicious slanders of warmongering of which we heard at the last general election. We are striving without pause to try to create an atmosphere of confidence abroad, try and decrease the differences between East and West. Peace through strength, that is our purpose. For unless we uphold our alliances, none of our negotiations can attain that result. Of course, events in the international scene affect us all here at home in our prosperity and in our daily life. And that is why I ask for your understanding and for your support in the efforts in which we are engaged. Never forget that the maintenance of peace depends upon the strength and unity of the Western Alliance. In that alliance, we in Britain have a leading part to play. And this pledge I can give you, that so long as I have the health and strength, I will do everything that in me lies to promote understanding and a lasting peace.